Well, good morning. Welcome to episode 13 when we're going to make prize New England apple pie. And this is a recipe that comes to me from the Yankee cookbook. And you can see it's lived a wonderful life. But this is from Chris's family, my husband's family. And I believe it is probably the best pie recipe in the world. And I'm going to reveal today the secret ingredient that makes for a fantastic pie crust. Light, flaky, it is the magic that makes the crust. And I will reveal that in a short while. Now, I did not grow up in a pie family, even though you know by now that my mother and my grandmother and everybody surrounding us loved to bake. But we were not pie people. I don't know why. And we candle out, we had a lot of fruit around, we picked everything. We just weren't pie people. But when I married into a New Hampshire family, what I discovered was they were definitely pie people. And by osmosis or just by marriage, I'm not sure what, but I have now become a pie person. And even though there was a certain time when Chris was the one who always made the apple pies in the family, but now I'm the pie maker. But it's because of this magical recipe, and again, it's called the Prize New England Apple Pie, and it is true. It is definitely a prize-winning apple pie. So we're going to do that today. I'm going to reveal the secret to the crust, and it's going to take a little bit of a different twist because the shirt I'm wearing and the stories may not completely be resonant with what I'm baking, but all of that will be revealed in time. So I am wearing what I would call a fundraising shirt today. It's called Touring Technique, and on the back it says New Order Crew, and Chris and I were supposed to see New Order and the Pet Shop Boys in concert in Toronto, well, coming up here at Labor Day. And of course, all of that was moved to next year, and maybe the next year after that, I don't know. But there was a fundraiser to raise funds for the folks that, when you do a large concert series or tour, there are so many people that support that, and it would be the crew. So all of the people who set up for the concert, set up your stage managers, and people who set up your instruments, and set up the where you're staying, and everything that happens on a tour. There are folks that are basically out of work this summer. So they did these shirts as a fundraising effort to support the crews that help when music events or performers tour. So that's my plug for that today, and a plug for New Order, so stay tuned. So hopefully one day we will get to see them in concert with Pet Shop Boys. And anyway, so we're gonna celebrate New Order today, but we're gonna celebrate it with this New England apple pie. And I'm also going to do a little twist on the apron that I have been wearing. And this was given to me by my good friend Melanie, who has been introduced to you several times, particularly on the banana bread episode. And her grandmother used to make aprons, was a great baker, and used to make these fabulous really cool aprons that probably are good because they cover more. I get a lot of flour on my shoulders, and this apron actually kind of covers it. And so she and her daughter Elizabeth specifically selected one out of Melanie's grandmother's collection on what they thought might be a great apron from a fabric perspective and the whole 9 yards of what I might enjoy. And boy, were they right. So stay tuned. I'm going to be sporting the new apron, and we'll have those memories today as we go ahead and make this prize New England apple pie. Well, you can see I'm sporting the new apron. It is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you can see it's beautiful. Black print with this great lime green stems and flowers on it. It's just fantastic. So we're going to wear that today when we're making this New England prize New England apple pie. And I have to tell you something that sort of was a magical byproduct that happened quite serendipitously. I had to run into the office for something, and our accounting consultant was in the office, and we started talking about pie and recipes that we've used. And she uses the same secret ingredient that I do, and even cooler than that, has rendered it herself from butchered pig. So it's a really cool story because my secret ingredient, or actually the Yankee Cookbook's secret ingredient to make a flaky, light crust is lard. So it was just talking about the pie that I was going to make today with our accounting colleague, and she was talking about rendering her own lard and using it not just in pie crust, but in pasties too. So that would make a phenomenal crust for pasties as well. So it was so fun to talk about just an innocent conversation about making pie. We talked about the secret ingredient. It brought up memories of childhood for her, what she's done currently, although the rendering of the lard is current. And also we had a great opportunity to talk about 4-H. We got a chance to talk about how we grew up and having, like butchering, getting a whole hog or a whole cow and having meat lockers and a whole chest freezer when you're, either currently or when you were growing up. And I honestly would have never probably had this conversation with her, and it was so much fun. That is the beauty and magic of story and being able to share. And it might seem just such an innocent conversation on what you're sharing, but it ends up being this whole long storyline of just great story. So I wanted to give a shout out to her for sharing that this morning innocently. We weren't planning on having that conversation, but one thing, talking about the pie recipe led to another, and it was just a wonderful conversation. And as I said in past episodes, you learn something that you might not have had an opportunity to talk about before. So it was just a great time to talk about a lot of different things. So we're going to go ahead and make the pie today. Now I'm going to tell you first, though, set your oven at 450 degrees, and you will actually bake the crust in the hot oven for 15 to 20 minutes at 450. Then you'll reduce the heat to 350 degrees and do your final bake 30 to 40 minutes longer. So just to let you know, first start out at 450 and then you will turn down your oven to 350. That's very important, and those two elements are quite important for the bake. So I've chopped up my apples already, and Granny Smith apples, but that's what I've been using. You can use, I guess, any tart apples. I just have chosen the Granny Smith. So, and I know from experience that it makes a great apple pie. So that's what we're going to go ahead and use, and you can use what you want. But to do the crust, it's going to require 2/3 cup lard, 2 cups all-purpose flour, and we are not sifting that. The dough whisk, the pastry whisk, is not on front stage center today. So just so you know, if you're going to miss it, you'll see it next time, but it's not being used today. So 2 cups all-purpose flour, not sifted, 1.5 tablespoons salt, and 1/4 cup cold water. So we're going to go ahead and show you how that all comes together. We're going to go ahead and put the dry ingredients in first, even though as far as the recipe is concerned, it does start out with the lard. I'm going to go ahead and start out with the dry ingredients and then put the lard in last. So we're going to go ahead and start out with 2 cups all-purpose flour, again, like I mentioned, using our great King Arthur flour, but not sifted. So that's one of the... Now, I have never sifted it, so I don't know what the outcome would be otherwise. I pretty much stay true to the recipe. Now, then we have 1.5 teaspoons salt. So we're going to go ahead and add 1.5 teaspoons salt. So we've got our 1 teaspoon and our 1/2 teaspoon salt, and then we're going to actually add our lard now. There are so few ingredients, you kind of forget that you really don't have a ton of ingredients for this recipe, which is kind of, interesting. You'd think to make a fantastic pie crust that you would have a lot more ingredients, but you do not. So I've put the lard in. I've got the flour and the salt and the lard in my bowl. I'm going to use a fork to make it sort of, these pea-sized lumps in it, which, me, at the end of the day, I'll probably just use my fingers. I do not pour the cold water onto this until I've got these clumps, these pea-sized sort of clumps. And again, you know, I'm getting flour all over me, but my shoulders are now protected, which is great. I find that I often have literally flour on both my shoulders because, you know, because of these, the concert t-shirts and so forth tend to be black, and I get flour everywhere. So we're going to go ahead and get that to our pea-sized clumps. I think we've got that. Oh, it just feels nice. Again, you know, I have to get in there with my fingers because there's something so luxurious about the texture of flour, and then you've got, you know, the lard in there with it. So we're going to go ahead and put our 1/4 cup cold water mixture over it, and we're going to be working it in with our fork. And I might have to add a little bit more of cold water to it because we're going to divide it into a ball, and then divide it into two because you want basically a lower crust and a top crust. So that's what our goal is at the moment. These are the only ingredients for the crust, no more, no less. I am going to add a little bit more water to make sure I can form it into a nice ball. So we'll go ahead and do that. So apparently now that I have the apron on, I have now managed to get it on my lower sleeve. So shoulders are fine, but bypass the shoulders and hit the bottom of my sleeve. So I'm going to get this and make a ball, as I say, shape it into a ball. We're going to divide it. We're going to roll it out and make 2 equal sizes because, as I said, we are creating a top and bottom to our pie. So I think that's formed. I did add a little bit more water, so I think we have formed our ball. I don't want to add any more water, I don't think. Well, maybe just a little bit more. I want it to hold its shape and hold in all of those great parts of the crust here. Okay, so now we have our ball that we're going to go ahead and roll out and make our pie crust, or put it into the pan. So I've rolled out half of the dough, and I'm just going to put that into our lovely pie container. So that's the bottom part of the pie. And I'm not going to take some of the excess crust off at the moment that's lapping over until we're finished and put our top layer on. So we've got our bottom layer in, we've rolled out half of the crust, so now we're going to go ahead and put the filling in. We're going to go ahead and put the apples in our pie crust bottom. Now I should tell you one thing to note is that my apples I cored and peeled a little bit earlier have been sitting in a little bit of lemon water so they don't brown. And because I have strained them or put them in a colander, but I did put a little sugar and flour on the bottom of my crust just because they might be a little wet. So that absorbs some of the wet. And put our apples in the bottom of our pie. And we want it to be generous. So I used, and these are small Granny Smith apples. They're not the big ones. So I used 6 of them, and that's about right. So if you're using the big Granny Smith apples, which is totally fine, I have used those before, I would suggest maybe cutting it down by 1 apple. So you can decide, you know, we still have to have room to put the top on. So I've got the apples in, and I'm going to pour actually 1 cup of sugar over the whole thing. So just, it'll work its way down to the bottom and get into all of the apples on layering it as it goes down. So we're going to do 1 cup of the sugar. And then we're going to go ahead and add a shaking of both cinnamon and nutmeg. So that's what I do. It does not give a specific. So I just do some shakes of the nutmeg because I love the smell of nutmeg. And we all know already that I love the cinnamon. That's no mystery to us anymore. Although I think I'm going to use maybe do 1/8 of a teaspoon here just to my shake. You've seen what happens to the flour on my shoulders. You can certainly see what happens. So not quite 1/8 of a teaspoon, but as I said, it just says shake, some cinnamon and nutmeg. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 tablespoons of butter just on top of that and let it work its way in. So I'm just cutting up the 2 tablespoons of butter and just putting it randomly on the top of the pie. And my apples did not brown, so that was really good. So my apples are going in, as I say, I put them in cold water as I peeled and cored them with a little bit of lemon juice, and they remained their true color. So, okay, we put the butter on top, and then we're going to shake a little bit of salt on top of that. You know, we've had it's quite tart, so we have to always, it's this balance between sweet and sort of tart, I would say. So we're just going to do a little bit of salt on top of that and put the lower crust on. And we're going to, at that point in time, shore up some of the bits that have gone over from the bottom of our crust. So I'm going to go ahead and roll out the top layer of the crust, and then we will come back together. I have gone ahead and put the top layer on top of my pie, and there's no mystery to it. It just might get a little tedious watching me do that. So then I wet my fingers just slightly and crimped the edges of my pie to form with the bottom layer. I went ahead and cut out little leaves. I just create this little leaf shape on top. I used 3 little leaves and I put on top. You don't have to do that. You could cut in an A for the steam vents. You could, shape a little apple, or don't do any of that. But I will tell you what you do need to do is use heavy whipping cream. Now some pastries use egg yolks. In this particular case, they recommend heavy whipping cream. So that's what I go ahead, and that adds to, not just the lard as our secret ingredient, but also the heavy whipping cream on top creates this beautiful golden, flaky, lovely top. And I am going to go ahead and I'm going to put some vents in it when I'm done, just to let some of the steam out. But right now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just using a pastry brush, and I'm going to just brush on the heavy whipping cream. So it's about as simple as that. And I follow this recipe pretty much to the letter. I have not done anything different than what the recipe calls for, because the one thing this prize-winning recipe allows for, and that is if you follow the recipe, you will have a successful outcome. So that's what we're looking for in this. There might be a time toward the end of the bake. Remember, it's at 450. That's what my oven is set for now. And then I'm going to reduce it after 15 minutes to 350. I might have to tent it and put some foil on top just to be on the safe side, but that'll be something you'll just have to watch. Each oven might be a little different, and sometimes it will burn my 3 little leaves or any kind of decoration that I put on there. It will burn them. I don't know why, even though I've put the heavy whipping cream on them as well. So I'm just going to cut a few vents, just some nice little slits in the top crust, and we're going to go ahead and get that in. So I have to tell you another New England story. And this could, it's true, happen anywhere, but this happened at his mom and dad's house in New Hampshire. His mom and dad were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and we decided it would be great to host a surprise anniversary party at their home, planning it from Michigan at their home in New Hampshire. We also decided it would be really fun to do a co-anniversary celebration for his aunt and uncle who were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. So remember, doing this from afar, his parents were actually going to be gone camping, so this worked out great as far as getting to their house, setting up. We had fantastic friends and family there who were in on the secret, and we have a key, of course, to the house, and so we were able to go ahead and get there and set up. And again, this was a complete surprise for them because of this wonderful esprit de corps from their family and so forth who kept it, and friends who kept it a secret. So we were actually at their house. Again, did a lot of things planning from afar. People would kind of wonder who was mowing the lawn at their house, because Chris would be out mowing the lawn. I probably peeled about 5 pounds of potatoes for potato salad. Actually, it's more than that. It's probably 20 pounds because it's a 5-pound bag. So I was making homemade potato salad. Discovered that my mother-in-law, as lovely as she is, did not have a sharp knife in that entire house. Up until this point, I did not take my own knives when I went to their house. Now I do, to make sure we have sharp knives, because that's a lot of potato salad to cut up with dull knives. In fact, that next Christmas, I got my mother-in-law her own set of sharp knives, but still take my own, because I just, you need some sharp knives. And you're cutting up onion, celery, potatoes, and using dull knives. It took a lot longer than it normally would have took. So we did that from afar. People helped make food, and we rented a tent out there. We had lights wrapped up or put in a circle within the tent. It was really interesting that Chris found on this little section in this internet little daily or weekly newspaper called the Cornish Connect, and these two women had gathered a lot of plates and dinnerware because one of their sons had gotten married, and they had all this extraneous dinnerware of really cool. They'd gone to flea markets and garage sales, and so there's this fantastic eclectic mix of plates and silverware, and Chris happened to see that in that little Cornish Connect, and they would rent it out because they had all of this, and people had added to it over time. Their friends and family sort of added to this collection. So it's all clean because you take it back clean, you receive it clean, you take it back clean, and he saw that, and that's what we used for this surprise anniversary party. So we had all of these wonderful, wonderful plates that were from all over, and dishware and silverware. We used that, and it was just a magical New England. Their anniversary is actually July 4th, so it was in the month of July, and we had the perfect quintessential blue sky, beautiful New England day. They were surprised, and the only thing is Lorraine was sort of saying, gosh, I wish they were coming back from camping, and you have shorts and a shirt on that you have for camping, not necessarily for greeting guests. But that did not matter. It was a complete surprise for them, which was the best out of the whole deal. And we were able to enjoy the tent, the lights, the setup, the dishes the next day for an alfresco brunch for any of those folks who were staying with his parents and friends and family who were still there. So that was just, I don't know why it's so stuck with me, but it was so much fun planning something with friends and family out there for someone in their own home. It was really fun, and that we pulled it off. So his cousins made food. His uncle really helped us with the setup. He was there for the whole time getting set up. And it was just one of those magical moments in a great natural environment that just was a very special day, and we were just thrilled to be able to do that for them. But those plates, we went out to this country road to pick up these plates. They had them in their barn, and we got to meet people we'd never met before, and it was all because of, they had wanted these eclectic mix of plates, and it kind of reminds me of, I think I talked about in one of the episodes that Outstanding in the Field, where what you bring to that standing in the field dinners on those farm tables is you bring your own plate. So you have this wonderful array and eclectic mix of different plates from different people, and it reminded me of that, to see all those plates set up and just to have that experience of people get conversation starter, right? Oh, this is so cool. This is the plate I got. Where did you get this from? Oh, these people had plates left over from a wedding, and we got to meet new people because of that. So it was really a great experience, and just really appreciated the fact that we were able to surprise his mom and dad. The pie has been in the oven at 450 degrees. I put it in for 15 minutes. It says 15 to 20. I have just turned the temperature down on the oven to 350 degrees, and it does say between 30 to 40 minutes. At the moment, I put it in for 35 minutes, and we will watch that. And we will watch also to make sure it doesn't get too brown on the top. So there's that sort of in between. You want it in a nice lovely golden brown, but you don't want to burn it. So I also wanted to tell you what I'm reading right now, and two completely different books. One fiction, one nonfiction, not unusual for me. One of them that I'm reading is Yes, I Can Say That. When They Come for the Comedians, We Are All in Trouble by Judy Gold, and this was just released. I will tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. The other book I'm reading is fiction, and it's called The Stationery Shop. It's a novel by Marjane Kamali, and great read as well. I'll talk to you about this one first. It is fiction, and it's one of those things that pre-COVID, I put it on hold at the library, and honestly, when it finally came through, once the library was open again, I couldn't remember what it was about. But I started it and it sucked me in completely. It was so good, which is what a great novel does for you. So it's about Tehran in the 1950s and the overthrow of democracy there. And it follows really this young couple who are really meet at this stationery shop, but it's also a bookshop. And messages are passed through the pages of these books to people. Information, that political information that needs to be shared. And so that's how this two older teens, I would say, meet at this stationery shop or this bookshop and fall in love. And what really happens from there during the politics of that time. So you're following, even though it's fiction, you're following the real life fall of democracy, the rise of the Shah, and you're really following what happened during that time. So it's a real story that is followed from a fictional point of view. Really intriguing, really good, could not put it down. It's just a great read about a time that we don't really talk a lot about anymore, and so it's it's fascinating. Then the book I mentioned first about Judy Gold's book, and it talks about basically about comedians being truth tellers, and it has always been that way. You know, we had Mark Twain, we had Will Rogers. You always have somebody who is using humor to document the truths of our times. And it seems like anymore, everyone is so offended by everything. And comedians, remember, are comedians. It's their job. They're looking for the truth in things and using comedy to be able to get the truth out there and what's happening in society. And it's true, when you shut down the comedians and don't remember that they're trying to make a point, then really you're undermining democracy as a whole. So it's really poignant and very prescient to now. It's so fitting. She goes through the different, comedians of her time and what was happening in politics and the world, and why comedians can really help through understanding of what's happening, and as I say, being the truth tellers. So a really great read. Again, it's Judy Gold's Yes, I Can Say That. When They Come for the Comedians, We Are All in Trouble. So two great reads, one nonfiction, one fiction. Check them both out at your public library. Well, we have just taken this beautiful, wonderful smelling pie out of the oven, and it just smells fantastic. I can't even explain how wonderful it smells. I mean, you know what a home-baked apple pie smells like. It's all that. It smells fantastic. So this is kind of how it ended up. It's very warm, and its juices are overflowing, onto my counter. And maybe we should have waited. So we will go ahead and try it a little later, but it's a bit warm. But I wanted you to understand how beautiful, just the smell in the kitchen, in the house, this wonderful smell of a home-baked apple pie. It just smells delicious. So we will cut into it a little bit later, and we'll see. The pie has cooled down enough for us to taste it. And that's really what we've all been waiting for, right? We want to be able to taste this fabulous pie. The ultimate taste test is, how does it taste? You hear that? The crust is just beautiful and golden. The inside apples are juicy and delicious. The bottom crust has held firm, which is important. I will tell you that I'm really grateful to be part of a pie family and to experience something from someone else's family that we have now incorporated into ours. And it's kind of a cool thing to be known as the person who makes pies in the family for holidays, summer events, doesn't really matter. But either way, this New England apple pie is absolutely delicious. So, as I say, easy ingredients, apples, cinnamon, nutmeg, easy ingredients. And just remember, the secret ingredient, the magic secret ingredient, is lard. So enjoy your apple pie as I know I will enjoy mine.